Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Career Success Secret Show. I'm your host, Mike Tomasello. I have a really special guest for you today. My guest has over 14,000 followers on TikTok. He has over 13,000 followers on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter. More importantly, he is a former hospitality manager turned full stack software engineer, and he did this at the ripe, crisp age of 46 years old. So if you are contemplating a career change, this is the episode for you. He's worked in tech for a variety of different companies, including FedEx. He's currently a developer advocate. Welcome, Lawrence Lockhart. Lawrence, how the heck are you today?
Man, I'm great, but who is that guy you're describing? He's amazing. I want to meet him. That couldn't
It is
possibly be me.
amazing.
I'm so glad to be here.
I'm very blessed to have gotten to know you over the past couple of years. Have you share some of your wisdom before? And I'm gonna assume some of the people listening to our episode today have never met you before. Let's start out with the whole career change thing. What were you actually doing as a hospitality manager when you started contemplating this shift to tech?
Great question. So, hospitality, as well as I would say warehousing, certain levels of retail, and in many cases, gas stations, things of that nature, these are often the jobs that we get or in the sectors that we get when you don't have marketable skills. So when I was young and should have been smart but acted dumb, I blew my opportunities in college, did not finish with a degree, did not finish with any marketable skills for the marketplace that I could contribute and add significant value and thus make significant money. So I just slipped into restaurants because that's what you do. I have to eat, I need to pay for my car. I'm not going to be able to stay with my parents forever. And so I started working at a local Dairy Queen. I was the guy that just made the ice cream cone. And then that became the cashier and then the drive-through guy. Next thing you know, I'm assistant manager with benefits. Oh, that was big time. And I actually thought I was making it because I was able to live on my own and pay for my own car. And 18 years later, I'm thinking to myself, I should be able to contribute greater than this. Besides the fact that I'm tired of being tired all the time. I was a general manager for a restaurant called Cookout when I decided to make the transition. And that's an all the time thing. So you might have 60 to 65 hours scheduled. But if you're the GM, when you're off, it's still your store, which means all it takes is one grill cook to call off, one overly aggressive customer complaint, and you're having to act on your off day, regardless of if it was scheduled or not. So you're always working. And even when you're not working, you're thinking about it. So your brain's on when it probably needs to be off and resetting and getting some rest. And that just got to be way too much. I had convinced myself over time that I liked it well enough to be good in it. I was a general manager. I was up to be the next district manager for the chain, but I had convinced myself for sanity purposes. Yeah, I can do this. I like this. I'm good at this. There's nothing about me that was wired for restaurants in particular. I wasn't one at my mom's coattails in the kitchen. I hated being in the kitchen. I just needed to do something to make money. And I learned how to be good at it because I did have good basic work ethics. I'm a Gen X guy. I was raised by boomers, so I have some good general purpose, good work ethics that could apply to any role or any position. So I made myself good at something that I necessarily wasn't well suited in. But there did come a point when enough was enough and too much was too much, and I felt my health failing. I saw myself missing key opportunities, key dates with my children. I have 3 children, amazing children. And even with my wife, relationship suffering, I'm thinking I have to do something different. And there was a point for sure where it went from it'll be a good idea, like a should, to a must. And that's a switch that even when I mentor people in any type of career change, if you're lacking motivation, if you're lacking direction, has that switch changed in your brain from should to must? Because as long as it's in the should category, you don't have sufficient adrenaline, sufficient dopamine, you don't have sufficient neurochemicals helping you along a path that might be really difficult, right? I learned to code. We'll probably get into that. That's difficult. You need some engine. You need some juice to push you through those difficult moments. And for me, that was a must. This has to happen. Like, I don't care what the factors are. I don't care what my demographics are, my background. This happens. This has to happen, or I'm not going to enjoy my life anymore. And God forbid, I might end up leaving here before my wife does because I'm just running myself in the ground 60, 70, 80 hour weeks over a fryer and over a grill and cleaning up messes and breaking up customer fights in the dining room. Like that's just not what I want to be doing at mid
Yeah.
40s. And so that was the motivation. This was a have to for me.
That certainly makes a lot of sense to me. And something you said earlier was that you were tired of being tired.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that a lot of people, especially right now, can absolutely relate to. So for that, how did you decide on software development? How did you decide that you wanted to learn how to code?
Gotcha. Yeah, probably three reasons for that. Number one, my dad was a mechanical engineer. He later in life went back to school, got his degree and mechanical engineering degree, and then moved to Mississippi. And he was a civil engineer by trade. So I had seen slide rules and electronic calculators like in the early 80s and map books because he worked in the Mississippi Highway Department of Transportation and Safety, and seeing him talking about bridge design and traffic analysis. So I had seen and heard math my whole life, and he put that in me. And so I was good at math in high school and good in science, and I did the science fair projects. That was already in me. And that was the direction that I was intended to go. But as I mentioned earlier, I blew it because I went from being a huge fish in a small pond to being a non existent guppy in an ocean of oceans. And it was just psychologically way too much because I think I started college at 17. It was way too much. And I never recovered from that until later in life. But it was still in me. So that was one answer to your question. The second answer is when I did decide I need to try something else besides restaurants, I used a career coach, which I highly suggest to people, a professional career coach who has the training and experience and the tools to help set you on a path that makes sense for you, right? Not just to give you the answers, but to help set you on a path. We went through a series of batteries of tests and questions and interviews. And the conclusion of it was that there were a few jobs that I was still well suited for based on my test results, personality type, all the Myers Briggs, like all of it. They just put all of it together. One of them was actuarial science, which at the time I didn't even hear of before. So I had to go Google it. When I learned it was like the math behind insurance, I'm like, no, that's boring. I'm sure it's great for some people, but for my personality, no, thank you. But the next one said web developer and then database developer. And those all these technical roles. And it blew my mind, Mike. Literally blew my mind because I haven't done deep technical things like that since college. We're talking decades ago. I'm not in math books. I'm not coding on the side or anything. This is just nothing I've even thought about really. But it showed up in the test that you potentially still have aptitude. And so that was the thing to say, hey, you know what? Let's give it a try. Let's try it one more time. Doesn't make a lot of sense. I haven't picked up a book, haven't done any coding. The only kind of coding I had done, anything technical I had done, was when web TV first came out. You got those little console boxes you could attach to your TV. I made a simple little, it wasn't even a HTML website. It was a template website just about myself. That was it. For 20, 30 years, I had never done anything technical. But between what was already in me from how I was raised, success that I had in high school, and then matching that many years later with these series of tests coming from the career coach saying, you potentially still can have some great success in these areas. That was a motivation to say, at least let me give it a try. Because the worst that can happen is I'll stay where I am. I wasn't leaving the restaurant business. I was doing well. I can do that forever, according to them. I just couldn't do it forever, according to me. So there was nothing to lose, everything to potentially gain.
Awesome. I love that you spent so much time like thinking about what was right for you and where your aptitudes were and the fact you got a coach. I find that a lot of people that when they first start thinking about making a career change, they often wait so long till they're so desperate, till they're in such a bad situation that they're like, okay, I got to change careers today. So tell me, strangers or whoever they're talking to or the internet, tell me what I should switch into. And you took a very thorough, a very methodological
Yeah.
approach. I'm using my words today.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that a lot of people can learn from. So I appreciate you sharing that. Now, someone who hadn't worked on anything technically or mathematical in a great number of years. I mean, I'm trying to do the math in my head, but I'm not as good at math as you. So, 10, 20 years potentially since you did stuff like that. What did the process look like? How long did it take you to really confirm that this was what you wanted to do? And then how long did it take you to learn? Did you go to a boot camp and really paint this picture in terms of how long it took you to get good at it enough for you to get hired?
Man, I love timeline questions because they give examples and they can hopefully help people to think in terms of what scale looks like. And the more examples, the better. I remember when I was just getting started and trying to find people to get examples from. The first one I found got his job in 3 months. I got a tech job in 3 months. And I just kept watching that video like, this is it, 3 months. It took me 2.25 years, Mike. I'm going to break it down for you. But the point for people who are learning and who haven't heard me talk before is your timeline is the right timeline. Anything and everything else is just a data point. It's just a data point on a plot graph. And you can look at it, you can expect it, you can compare in a positive way, but no one else's timeline makes sense except you for you. And if you try to force another person's timeline onto your life and your particular characteristics don't match, you'll find yourself either taking shortcuts, buying things you don't need, or engaging in activities that don't actually help you advance along your plan. So your timeline, whatever it is the right one. So for me, we'll start with the fact that I started with free resources and low cost resources. That was really important. I was making okay money, but I didn't have a ton of money to say, hey, let me just go get a bachelor's degree in computer science. That was out. I had a full family, and the car, the dog, the house, the mortgage, the whole 9 yards. There wasn't all this free cash. So my primary resources were Free Code Camp, codingphase.com, a host of Udemy courses, and then different people I would watch on YouTube, people like Dev Tips, James Quick, and a few others that I'll watch on YouTube. So I started there just trying to see what does the landscape look like. It seemed like it was going to be something program related. And at the time, I came across information that it seemed to be true that front-end web development was a low barrier to entry. Now, low barrier to entry is a tricky phrase. Does that just mean easy to get into? Or does it mean non-competitive? Or does it mean something else or some combination? So that's a tricky phrase, but I just took it to mean this will not involve an excessive amount of time. Like the easiest path, the most likely path for me to get into a technical role will be front-end web development. At the time, that was true. I keep saying at the time in case there's any technical people here. Right now, I don't know that it's true. It's not that it's gotten significantly harder, but the market conditions have gotten significantly larger in terms of the scale and the number of people who are qualified to do the same number of jobs. It is dramatically, exponentially increased from when I got in. So that's a huge data point to understand. But front-end web development seemed like the way to go. Those are the resources that I used. And I remember going through the basics of HTML and CSS and just being happy and doing well and making basic, what we call static websites that don't do anything. And then I got to JavaScript and it was like, oh my gosh. For those who don't know, JavaScript is a Turing complete language. It's a true programming language, which means when you learn JavaScript for the first time, if you don't have a computer science background, you're also learning some computer science, which is an entire discipline. And it knocked me out. It totally knocked me out so badly that I remember changing from one resource to another one because I thought maybe it's just bad authors. This wasn't made for me. So I bought another course and tried that one. It didn't work. I tried another course and I bounced from course to course. Then I just quit altogether. Like, forget it. This is not fun because remember, I'm still working 60 plus hours a week, coming home. Let's say I go into work at 8 o'clock, come home at 6 in the evening, a little bit of family time, 10, 11 o'clock, I'm going up in the loft and studying for 2 to 3 hours overnight and not being successful. That was worse than the job. That was worse than flipping burgers. And so I went through at least 2 definitive stopping points, which is part of why it took me so long, where I just gave up, said, forget it, closed the tutorial, closed the books, closed everything, just went back to regular life at work. And then some time later realized I have to try it again. I got to try it again. I don't know what it was. I had to try it again because I can't do this. This will not work for me. So I had a lot of start and stops. It was not a linear path, but I kept coming back to it, until such time as I was able to connect with people. And that was about a year and 3/4 into my journey, year and 3/4, almost 2 years into my journey, meeting with actual people. Up till that time, everything I did was just me in the loft. We had a 2-story house. I'll go in the loft, close the door, the family knows. If the door is closed, dad's coding, leave him alone. And it was just me and the computer. But at or around that 1 3/4 year mark, I finally left my house and connected with actual humans in person who had already done what I'm trying to do and far beyond, and began to get all kinds of practical guidance from them directly from the horse's mouth. People who would say, "Hey, let's look at your portfolio together. Hey, that's interesting. Let me show you some other examples, things, ways to think about that." People who said, "Hey, let me see your resume. Let me run this by my wife. She's good with resumes." People who literally took me in with asking nothing in return at all. Just wanted to help a guy out who seemed interested because I was very interested, naturally, organically hungry. And that happened in in-person meetups here in the Memphis area, a place called Code Connector, which is an online nonprofit group that help people get into tech. It falls under the umbrella of MemTech, the Memphis Technology Foundation here in Memphis. It's an umbrella organization for a number of meetups, but meetups for sure. And not just showing up, but showing up interested and asking questions, putting myself out there, making my needs known, and then receiving and responding to the feedback. That made almost as much difference as all the tutorials put together, every course put together, touching actual people. And that placed in me for the rest of my life, for those 6.5 or so years later, just the importance of connecting with people and how they can kind of fast track you in some places from getting over certain humps, certain bumps, avoiding certain mistakes and getting to where you want to with success. Not only that, but when I connected with those people, I'd already been applying. This might be another segment, so maybe I should stop here. But I do want
Yeah,
to say they have a
yeah,
Slack
let's
channel
stop there
that helped me
because
with the job.
I have about 83 and a half questions that I want to ask you, and I've already forgotten what half of them are. So when
Yeah.
you say meetup, is that specifically meetup.com, or how would someone go about finding these meetups?
When I learned that meetups were important, I used everything. I Googled Eventbrite, Facebook events, meetup.com, everywhere. I just exhausted everything I could find to find anyone who was at meeting in person talking about technical things. The first one I found, I think, was through Eventbrite. And it was local. I was in Oxford, Mississippi at the time. And I did my research, but unfortunately, they only were for students and faculty of the local university. And I
Mm.
was neither. So I was staff at one time, but I wasn't student or faculty. So that didn't work. The next one I found was in Little Rock, Arkansas, which was hours away. They had a 1 day, all day meetup hosted by Iron Yard, which was a boot camp there. So I went. I heard this is important. I'm taking people at their word. I drove 3, 4 hours one way for like a 4 hour 1 day meetup. And we did some coding together, interacted, exchanged LinkedIn's, and then 4 hours or so back home because I was told meeting people in person is important. And then finally, via meetup.com is where I found the ones that were in Memphis, which again, that wasn't local for me. I wasn't in Memphis yet. I was still in Oxford. So that's an hour-and-a-half trip. So I would get off on a Wednesday, hop in the car, and drive up here for a 6:30 or 7 o'clock meetup, that for an hour to two, and then drive back home. But that made a huge difference for me. So in terms of where did I find them, I would look everywhere, everywhere.
Awesome. Love it. I think that's extremely helpful. I want to circle back and give people a picture, and it can be a brief picture because I think you covered a lot of the picture already. I just want to do some of the math for people out there. You were so you were in your 40s, you were married, you had 3 kids, you were working sometimes as much as 60 hours a week, and then you were on average, of course we all have our stops and starts, but on average you were spending 2 to 3 hours a night working on this stuff on top of everything else you had going on in your life. Is that a pretty good summary?
That's very repetitive, yeah. I'll say minimum of an hour. If you don't get into a good hour, you don't have a chance for your mind to get into that flow state. So that would be good for maybe just like some casual reading. If I actually want to code, to learn, to build, it's 1 to 3 hours on average. So yeah, that's very accurate. And
Awesome.
yes, for anyone counting, that is a lot of hours.
I'm sure it varied from week to week, but was that 5 days a week, 7 days a week? What did that look like for you?
As often as my energy would permit. There were 7 day weeks, and sometimes, particularly when it was like an interview, like I had interviews coming up, a 7 day a week would be quite normal. And I would just consider it. It wouldn't even be a thing like I'm counting the days. I know it was 7 days just because of how my workflow went, but I wasn't
Mhm.
counting the days. It was just what do I need to get done. And there's only so many days. None of us has any more days than the other. None of us gets any more hours in a day. So what do I need to get done, and what will it take to get there? So if I have an interview in 2 weeks, I'm not ready. My normal 2 hour a day cadence for 5 days a week is probably not enough, particularly if I'm trying to make myself competitive. I'm trying to make myself the one that gets picked, not just one amongst the bunch. So a normal would be five-ish, but 6 and 7 absolutely happened.
Yeah.
And yeah,
I love all of the work that you put into because I think it demonstrates when you want something great, you need to put in something great. I'm imagining that listener out there, and I think there's a lot of you, and for 2 years, 5 plus days a week, multiple hours after a long job, that's just not worth it. Like what would be your message or advice to the person that's unhappy in their job, but like they're saying, "Hey, I'm not going to put in that amount of time."
yeah. Two things. And that's a great statement because worth it is 100% subjective, just like timelines. And so what I did is absolutely not worth it for many people, and I would not suggest it. They need to figure out what are they willing to do and what results are those activities likely to bring. That's the definition of worth it. Because for other people, they would have burnt out trying to do what I do. Others would do what I do and more. It's very, very personal. You have to know what you're wanting for yourself. I was wanting to be the best. I was wanting to excel. I was wanting to be great in this, not just one amongst many. I was wanting to be good enough, be able to teach and help others and bring others along, just like so many amazing people like Ted Patterson and James Quick and Joe Ferguson poured into me, and Joe Santos Garcia poured into me. I want to do that for other people, but I had to know things. I needed to have a certain level of accomplishment for the validation that this guy knows what he's talking about. So I was trying to get to a certain place. I wanted to be Simone. Okay? I wanted to be LeBron over here, where they know what they're talking about. They've been doing this and they've been successful in your face for years. There's thousands, if not millions, of people who practice gymnastics, but there's only one Simone. She did things other people just don't do. The LeBron practice story, the Michael Jordan practice story, when you see these elite performers in any realm of life, the one commonality is they tend to do things others don't do. Or to use your language, for others, it's not worth it. And that's okay. You don't have to be them. You have to determine what is worth it for you and what activities are likely to bring that level of success. Now, for me to want this level of success in the amount of time that I did and say I can only invest an hour a week, I would still be studying. That's just not likely. It's not logical. There's too many other people who are on the grind. It would be like me getting in a 100-meter race thinking I'm going to beat Usain Bolt's record, but I practice once a month. It's just not going to happen. It doesn't matter if I'm a nice guy. I can pray about it. I can make a vision board. If I'm not putting in the requisite work, there's just a certain level of results that I shouldn't expect. And so I can choose to simply do something else. I don't have to do that thing anymore. But if I decide this is the thing I'm going to do, then I should be able to look at those examples we talked about earlier and be able to meet out from that what would be some sort of a typical work plan that gives me a high likelihood of getting that level of success.
Got it. Love it. I want to dive a little bit more specifically into job search. And if you were starting a job search yourself from scratch, let's say tomorrow you decided to look for a new job and you didn't have much of a social media following, what is the process that you would follow?
Gotcha. Fantastic. Okay. So the job search for me in that case would not start with jobs. It would start with people. And that's a hard sell because, again, timelines. If a person's objective is, I want to be hired by X company within 3 months, and then Lawrence, Mr. Tech Guru, comes on and says, you probably should spend just about a good solid month making more connections to increase your likelihood of getting a referral or at least helpful information about a company or a role, then they tune me out because I've thrown off their timeline. But that would be my first step, investing in the connections for people, because that has shown the greatest value, sometimes above and beyond my technical abilities. Right now, my LinkedIn following, I think I have about 8,000 connections. And the utility there is for almost any company that I can think of if I wanted to transition in my current, or for my current job, which I have no interest in doing. I love about it. They'll have to kick me out. But if for some reason I wanted to go somewhere else, for almost any technical company I could name, I have at least one connection. That is exceptionally beautiful. That is a superpower because it's an inside man or woman, as it were, from whom I can either ask for a referral or at minimum get information, right? Because in some cases, I can save an application that I got the information, this is not somewhere you want to work, or that particular team has issues, or they keep cycling through people. I can get valuable information. So those connections are huge. Not so much about a social media following, but people connections from whom I can derive information. That would be my absolute first step.
So
Closely,
let's pause there
go
for
ahead.
a second. So
Sure.
two follow-up questions to that. And connections being the priority, what would you say to people that say, oh, well, that takes more time. I need a job as soon as possible?
Yeah. Well, the time is going to elapse regardless. If you can do it without doing that, then you don't need my advice. What I'm speaking from is from the number of candidates that I've coached, mentored, worked with, for whom we can see that for sure those connections make a difference. They make an absolute difference. So, yes, that takes more time, but it's supposed to take more time. Like warming up before you run takes more time. That's just it's an investment that pays off tremendously.
If I can sort of put my own spin on your words, are you saying that it's worth putting in that seemingly extra time because one, in the long term, it's going to accelerate your results, and two, it's going to make your application to interview success rates more effective by building these relationships? Would that be accurate?
Yeah, and if I could refine it even more, I would say not investing that extra time, but failure to invest that time is neglecting to do the work. So we use a phrase like due diligence. What does due diligence mean? It means there is a requisite set of steps that has to be done every single time. And I think that is one of those. So I don't consider it extra time. I think it's a mandatory part of the process.
Awesome. I love it. I think trying to skip it sort of a recipe for delaying one's job search. So I love knowing I'm not the only one out there saying that. So and then the importance of building relationships and building a network. And is the best way to start that, in your opinion, through going to meetups and local events like you were talking about, or is it something different?
You mentioned my 14,000 followers on TikTok, 13 on X. I mentioned my 8 on LinkedIn. The core of all those thousands and thousands of people are people right here in my neighborhood, my greater local business. That is the core of all of it. Got a guy named JC right down the road. We work together in an organization called Code Connector, the same one that helped me get my first chance. We help mentor and advise in that organization today. It falls under an umbrella of a thing called Memtech. Memtech has one of its leaders named Joe Ferguson, famous from the PHP community. I know him personally. I bought a computer from him. These are my people. From that, everything else grows. That's my nucleus. And if all my followers and all my connections were to go away from social and no one ever knew me on social media ever again, I know I can go to JC, I can go to Joe, I can go to James, I can go to George Spake, I can go to people who are right around the neighborhood. Not just, do you have a job, but hey, can we talk about some things? Can we talk about tech landscape? Can we just talk for a minute about what's going on? Let me buy you coffee, right? It's hard to buy a person coffee digitally when people do it, but it's so much more meaningful to say, let's meet at Starbucks on State Street at 2 p.m. Saturday. Sure, I'll meet you. And you sit and you have those human interactions. One of the things I think people miss about social media is the reason it exists. The media isn't the important part, it's the social. You have a desire to be social with other humans. We are social communal beings by nature of the type of mammals we are. And we've been given an electronic medium or media to facilitate those connections. But that's just the vehicle. The important part is not the vehicle, it's the fact that you want to be social. You want to connect, whether it's for jobs, career, or just any other reason. You have a desire to be social with other humans, which is a contract that has all kind of power to it. And so I can do social without media. The problem is when people want to do social with only media, because you're missing the plot, so to speak. It's about the people. It's really about the people. And when you mean that, and you don't just say the buzzwords, but when you demonstrate yourself in that way, people can tell, right? Not just in the things you say or do, but like in a real etheric heart way. They can tell this person is genuine. Like he or she means what they say. I can trust them, which means if an opportunity does come up, that's the kind of person I want to pull onto my team. That's the kind of person I'll let know about. I don't believe in hidden opportunities, but maybe some that are not as public as others, because I trust them over the time of the relationship and how I've consistently seen them show up every day, especially sitting right across the table from each other, having a cappuccino.
Yeah, I think you alluded and covered part of my next question, but I'm going to ask it anyway because you said something I think is really important at the whole start of building relationships things. You pointed out not necessarily asking people for a job or job leads or referrals. Instead, having conversations with people about the tech landscape, what sort of companies that they think are hot right now, what technologies are interesting, advice on different things that one might do in order to be more effective in their job search or to be better as a software developer or whatever role they're trying to get good at. Why is it important to take that approach in your opinion? And why is it a bad approach to go the other way?
Well, in the technical world, for sure, the same way no one likes to be sold to, they don't want you to try to get them to sell you anything either. So it just feels weird. Like we always say, developers and engineers, hate to be sold to, which makes my personal job a little challenging because I'm, in a sense, selling our products and services, but they don't want to be sold to. But they are interested in doing things better. They are interested in their lives being better. And so if you and I were having an interaction, and I know you work somewhere I want to work, rather than me asking you for a job, the smart thing for me to do would be to see what opportunities are there, at least publicly. Do they match? Do the expectations of that job match my strengths? And over time, allow you to see what those strengths are in a very tangible way. That I find to be very powerful because people will recommend you for things that you didn't even know existed. I've been invited to conferences just as an attendee to speak and other opportunities from people observing me. I think the benefit of building in public is not just tweeting every other day, which I did on my project, but it's an exposure of what you bring to the table in a really global sense, right? It's not the hard sell, and so no one has a reason to give me the resistance, right? If I don't ask, there's no reason to say no. I'm just making sure even this podcast. Even this podcast is a way for me to expose some of what's on the inside of Lawrence. And who knows who will see it or hear it. And who knows, it could be 5 years from now, right? 10 years, anytime. I remember that podcast and you said this and it made a difference. Or you said this and I can relate to that. Or you said this and I can use that kind of knowledge on my team. So exposing your capabilities in a public way is just it's a low and slow investment. It's a Warren Buffett way of investing, right?
Mm.
This is not day trading. I'm going to hit just the right stock. It's going to go sky high by 5 p.m. These are slow, small, incremental investments that are safer and certainly much less abrasive to people who tend to really not like the hard sell.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I don't know if it makes sense to every single person listening, which leads me to my follow up question. And the skeptic out there is saying, sounds like even more work. It's probably just faster for me to apply online and keep applying online. What would your response to that person be?
Depends on what you have in your background and in your combined profile, what your combined brand looks like. So when I talk about making connections, LinkedIn's and socials and building in public, please understand there will be people who graduate from MIT, from Georgia Tech, from Stanford, from Berkeley. They will graduate in May. With minimal LinkedIn connections, minimal social media connections, they will absolutely land high paying technical roles with little to no effort because they have a background, pedigree, internships, potentially GPA, that speaks for them. All they have to do is put it on a piece of paper and show it to someone, and they will be snatched up. Okay? That is an elite percentage of people who don't need any connections. They may never do socials. It's funny how many very experienced gurus, I'm talking about people who have written languages and written frameworks, have tiny socials because they're too busy working. They don't need them. Their work speaks for themselves. So there is a pedigree, there is a level, there is a strata of people who have a pedigree educationally with experience where the connections part is minimally game changing. It just speaks for themselves. I'm not that person. Okay. I told you I dropped out of school. They kicked me out. I went to college for 4.5 years and it was like, no, this isn't working. Go home. So it didn't work for me. I went back and got my bachelor's years later in general business just because I kept preaching the importance of university to my children, but I didn't have one myself. I hated being inconsistent. So I went on an online program and I got a degree. But the actual core technical degree, I never did that. So I don't have that. So that's not a thing to cry about. That's to say, hey, if I'm missing this, what things can I do? What's in my power that I can use to help supplement that? And everything that I've spoken to so far is speaking of that thing. So I'm speaking to those who don't have that type of a pedigree where you can just walk in the front door. They say, you went to Oxford, you went to so-and-so, Georgia Tech, 4.0, 5.0, SWE, Apple internship, Microsoft internship. Yeah, come on in. I don't have that. But what I do have, I bring to the table and make sure people know about it.
Yeah, thanks for that. So a couple of things that I would add to that conversation, and I don't think you really meant it this way, but I want to clarify. Those people that get a computer science degree from Stanford, or a master's degree or a PhD, or MIT or Georgia Tech, those that are finding jobs easily, it's not that they're not having to put in a lot of work. It's that they put in a lot of work on a different timeline and on different things than you did. And so they had to work their butt off to, be well known by their professors and the career services organization. For their level, they are perceived as one of the best in the country, or potentially in the world, at what they do. Because I will tell you, I work with people at a variety of different colleges and universities, and some of them have gone to the Harvards of the world, the Stanfords of the world, and they had initial success early on. And then now that they're at a different level, they're no longer seeing the success in their job search that they did when they were fresh out of school, because now they're competing against different people that are doing these additional things that we're talking about. Loved everything that you said. We are getting towards the end of our time. So
Wow,
I
that was
have
fast.
does go by really fast. There's still 47 different questions left on my list, but the
I
two
talked to the
47 questions wasn't realistic. But you're just you have so much wisdom.
thank you.
If someone wants to learn more from you, or someone wants to contact you, where should they go?
Great question. So the best place for a contact would be TopMate. I use it for scheduling purposes and connecting with people because I am absolutely horrible at DMs. For all the things that I know that I'm good at, I am horrible with DMs, and I'm not giving out my email. You can probably find it, but I'm not giving that out. But if it goes to TopMate, that is one place that I search for any type of connection. These are people who are making career transitions, just want to talk, shoot the breeze. The questions I mentioned asking earlier about market conditions, any of those topics, just book a free call and we can just chat for 15 minutes at any time. And then together determine, hey, is there utility in continued conversation in this fashion, or do we want to connect on socials or something from there? That's the absolute best place to go. Most of my tips that I've shared in places like Twitter Spaces and others are on some of my TikToks. So I do want people to check out the TikTok at their convenience, just because so much has already been recorded. Excuse me, sorry.
Got it. So if someone is interested in some mentorship or potentially some coaching from you, and really getting to know you, TopMate sounds like the best place to go. And then you mentioned TikTok, and I think you're on a large number of social media platforms. We won't go through all of
Yeah.
them. Is your handle on most platforms Lawrence Decodes?
It is. I'm Lawrence Decodes everywhere. If you just Google Lawrence Decodes, you'll get about 3 or 4 different platform listings. So easy to find that.
Fantastic. So my final question for you, it's a little bit open-ended. And so this is your,
Dangerous in my hands.
so if you could leave, particularly our audience for today's episode is people that are in the midst of a career change or they're contemplating a career change. If you could leave that audience with your final words of wisdom, what would your final departing thoughts be?
That thought would be a Greek saying that actually came from Northeast Africa, Egypt originally, which is man know thyself. One of the biggest mistakes that I find people do is trying to pursue others' dreams. Vis-a-vis, I saw this on Instagram, I saw this on YouTube, I heard this on a Twitter space, and they chase after dreams that don't match them. So man know thyself. What type of environments do you like working in? What type of companies do you like working in? What strengths do you have, whether they're technical or not, or even if you're not in a technical discipline? What strengths do you have that you can bring to any job? And then figuring out of the many thousands and hundreds of thousands of jobs that there are, like, again, technical or non-technical, I'm going to specify tech. What would you potentially enjoy doing? You, right? Whether it's the hot job or not, the one that everybody's talking about or not, these things aren't as important as what would you actually not mind doing for the foreseeable future. And then the next part of the line, or the next part of that data plot is, are those jobs available? So if my intention was, I really want to be, I don't know, a house painter, and in my tiny community, there's 100 house painters, it's probably not a good match, right? Even if I want to do it and have strengths in it, if there's no jobs there, my desire that there be a job, not going to make a job. I need to have some understanding of the landscape. So I start with my strengths, what I want to do, environments that I want to work in, what I'm willing to learn potentially, right? Because sometimes I can transfer skills, sometimes I can learn new skills. What am I willing to learn? And then what does that job market look like? Is there a potential that I can see? Yes, there's companies here, there's enough examples. I believe I can make it because I have those examples in front of me. Being able to draw that line gives you enough information to then take to a coach like a Mike Tomasello and say, hey, I've analyzed my background, my strengths, I know what I want to learn. Can you help me get to the next level? Now they have data to really help you and escalate your plan.
I love it. It's such an important step, self-awareness, knowing yourself and really what the right fit is for you. I think a lot of people try to skip that step.
Yeah.
And worse, they try to have people that don't know them, like even half as well as they know themselves, make decisions for them in terms of what might be a good fit. So I felt like that was a really important thing to end on.
Thanks. I've
So
seen that too.
I want to thank Lawrence Lockhart for being here today, aka Lawrence Decodes. Please,
Finally,
please go check him out on TikTok, Twitter, X. Hire him on TopMate. Very, very reasonable prices. And I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode of the Career Success Secret Show. I am your host, Mike Tomasello. Please, if you liked this episode, I'm going to ask that you subscribe, rate, and review. For a beginning show like ours, it makes a huge difference in other people finding the show. And we love your feedback. We love your comments. We love your questions. So please reach out and let us know what you thought of the episode, what we missed, what we should have added. We want to hear from you. So thanks, everybody, and have a wonderful rest of your day.